Hello everybody, today we are going to be talking about Air Jordan Fusions. We're going to talk about some of the different Air Jordan Fusion models we've seen over the years and rate some of them from best to worst. These Frankenstein Jordans go on to be more readily accessible on the market for most people, but according to sneakerheads, somewhat dilutes the purity and sanctity of these much celebrated models. To kick off today's episode, we are going to talk about the Air Jordan Air Force One mashup. We're going to start off with the AJF3. You can see the upper is taken from the Air Jordan 3, and you can see that the midsole and the outsole is taken from the Air Force One, where the air unit from the Air Jordan 3 has been integrated into the Air Force One midsole. These came out back in 2008 to a relatively positive reception and came out in a variety of different colorways, including House of Hoops exclusives and even some limited release drops as well. From here though, in my opinion, the AJFs would only get worse. The 4s aren't too bad. The AJF 5, in my opinion, is hot garbage. AJF 6 isn't too bad in the sense that it looks very similar to an Air Force One high. Things start to go really pear-shaped when we get to the AJF 8. This one is disgusting. The AJF 9 basically just looks like an Air Jordan 9. I guess because the midsoles of the Air Force One and the Air Jordan 9 are pretty comparable. AJF 10 is dog water. AJF 12, no good. And the AJF 13 could be the worst of the bunch. I do think the sneaker that makes the best transition or the best use of the strap is the AJF 20. Personally, out of all the AJFs, I think the 3 black cements is the best. Next up, we're going to talk about the Air Jordan Dub Zero. This was the very first hybrid Air Jordan. They came out in 2005 to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Air Jordan, hence why they are called the Dub Zero. You can see here they take inspiration from a few different Air Jordans. I'm sure you guys can pick out the different parts. You can see the tooling from the Air Jordan 4 on the midsole and the outsole. You can see the use of the heel tab from the Air Jordan 6 on the back. The use of patent leather wrapping around the bottom a la the Air Jordan 11. And then you can see some nods to the Air Jordan 12 and the Air Jordan 13 in the upper, as well as the laser etching on the upper from the Air Jordan 20. Now, I personally think these are absolute arse. I've always thought them to be an abomination, an egregious offense to the eyes, and am delighted to say that I have never owned, nor do I ever want to own, a pair of Dub Zeros, and no offense to any of you guys out there that may well have these and love these. They came out in a variety of different colorways, but I think the most classic colorway of these is probably in this Chicago or fire red colorway. What do you guys think about these? Next up, we have the Jordan Spizikes. These were made as a tribute to legendary filmmaker and Jumpman confidant Spike Lee and his iconic partnership with the brand going back to the Mars Blackman days. Again, as you look at the shoe, you can probably pick out all of the different features from the different individual shoes that went into this. You have the midsole tooling from the Air Jordan 3, as well as the inclusion of the elephant print. You also have the wings on the side from the Air Jordan 4. The shape of the upper comes from the Air Jordan 5, and the lace lock and the tongue coming from the Air Jordan 6. These debuted back in 2007, and I have a little bit of a bias to these because I've had a few pairs of Spizikes. It's a pair that I used to wear a lot back in sort of 2007, 2008. They actually started off relatively limited, and then they started to wheel out colorway after colorway. And in my opinion, are probably the best Air Jordan Fusion model of all time. What do you guys think? Next up, we have the Air Jordan 6 rings. These released back in 2008, right around that hot spot for Jordan Fusions. And these commemorate Michael Jordan's 6 different NBA championships by taking inspiration from each of the shoes he wore while he was running those successful campaigns. 6, the 7, the 8, the 11, the 12, the 13. And despite the fact that it has so many different elements, this particular shoe doesn't look too Frankenstein-y. In fact, certain colorways colorways of the 6 rings have been really popular over the years. This is probably one of the few Air Jordan Fusions that has gone on to command a little bit of hype and a little bit of excitement in amongst sneakerheads. I would put this on the upper tier of Jordan Fusions. I don't think the model is that bad at all. And so I would probably rate these after the Spizikes as the next best fusion. The Air Jordan Son of Mars. This was the follow-up to the Spike Lee inspired Spizike series, combining elements as you can, I'm sure, recognize once again from the Air Jordan 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and to me shows Nike's design team drunk with power. These are ghastly. But around this time, the aesthetic with the strap was definitely popping off. You guys will remember the Kanye shoes with the straps. I feel like these were kind of piggybacking off that a little bit. I'm gonna put the Son of Mars Fusions as one of the absolute worst of all time. Even worse than the Dub Zeros. Next up, we have the Air Jordan 6 1723. As you can see, blending together the Air Jordan 6 and the Air Jordan 17, which when you add those numbers together gets you 23. Jordan Brand had a long storied history of making shoes or packs to add up to 23. You guys remember the Countdown pack from 2008, that type of stuff. This was also marketed as a performance model as well, meaning people were taking these to hoop in. And to be honest, I can understand why. This one isn't so bad. This is kind of like a mid-tier fusion for me. Not as good as the Spizikes, not as bad as the Son of Mars, right in the middle. Next up, we have the Air Jordan True Flight. Now this isn't so much a fusion of Jordan models as it's a all-time classic silhouette that was updated and modified for performance reasons. As you can see, the True Flight draws inspiration from the Air Jordan 7, but incorporated a much more lightweight upper, responsive cushioning, and a herringbone patterned outsole for excellent traction on the courts. Coupled together with a much more reasonable price point back in 2009, these were selling as a highly viable option for people to hoop in. In terms of the aesthetics, they look absolutely shit and belong right down the bottom of the list. The Air Jordan Mars 270. This is a relatively recent release in the lineage of Air Jordan Fusions. This model was designed by Spike Lee's son, Jackson. As you can see, it takes inspiration from 4 iconic Jordan models. You can see shades of the Air Jordan 1, the Air Jordan 4 and 5, as well as the 6. You'll notice that the heel tab or the spoiler on the 6 is quite a prominent feature in a lot of these Air Jordan Fusions. But the most notable component is the addition of the Ginormous Air Max 270 midsole. These came out back in 2019, and the whole idea behind the 270 Air Max midsole was to provide an exceptional amount of cushioning and comfort. I happen to think these are pretty shit, but not bottom of the barrel shit. Kind of like just under mid-table shit. What do you guys think? The Zoom Vapor Air Jordan 3. These could be the best Jordan Fusion of all time next to the Spizikes. In fact, probably better than the Spizikes. I have a pair of these. I've shared them with you before. I have the Atmos collab, and I love these because they bring together one of the greatest tennis players of all time and one of the greatest, if not the greatest, basketball players of all time. The Zoom Vapor silhouette is a beautiful silhouette, very simple tennis shoe, and it brings in elements of one of my favorite Air Jordans of all time, the 3. I just think this works perfectly. Unique blend of classic design, modern technology. You've got style, you've got performance. And these, when they released back in 2014 in the original white cement colorway and later on in the black cement colorway, came out to a cheeky bit of hype. They sold out, they went on to resell, they do the same thing to this day. And the model that I got, the Atmos, is a pair that I was actually lucky enough to see Roger Federer play in live. And so I feel like this pair right here is one of the best Air Jordan Fusions of all time. Right up there at the top, if not the best. Next up, we have the Jumpman 2 Tray. 2 Tray. Anything to riff on the 23. This was marketed as a versatile basketball shoe that combines style and performance, sleek design, high top profile. This is one of those fusion Jordans that was made for the courts, and you can see the elements from the Air Jordan 6 and the Air Jordan 7 as well as the Air Jordan 11. And I'm not trying to downplay the performance aspect of these shoes. I'm sure these are absolutely fine to play in. From an aesthetic standpoint though, I just think these are garbage. Down down towards the bottom, not right at the bottom. The Jordan MVP, this is a model that we are currently seeing a few iterations of and some different colorways. You can see the inspiration, particularly the midsole from the Air Jordan 6. And these are, to be honest, pretty clean. I'm gonna put this right around the middle. The Air Jordan 60 Plus, these are rubbish. These celebrate and pay tribute to Michael Jordan's historic scoring performances, and so they take inspiration from the shoes that MJ was wearing whenever he scored 60 plus. Personally, I think these are horrible. Next up, the Air Jordan Horizon. This is a lifestyle sneaker, sort of blends the old sporty style with everyday comfort. And you'll remember that Jordan Brand really got into this lifestyle crossover phase with shoes like the Horizon, which I think are pretty ghastly, and these, the Air Jordan Futures. This was an attempt to bring some of the signature components of MJ's performance shoes into a more lifestyle context. And the Jordan Future was actually pretty successful when it first came out, featuring of course the outsole and midsole tooling from the Air Jordan 11, and then the woven upper. I can remember having a pair of Air Jordan Futures, to be honest, and remember thinking that they were quite overrated, to be honest. Whilst the Jordan Future isn't that ugly, I would still put it as a mid-tier Jordan Fusion. You also have the Air Jordan Comfort Air Max 10, which combined the look of the Air Jordan 10 with the Air Max 97 outsole. These came out back in 2011 and aren't too bad, to be honest. You also had the Comfort Viz Air 11, combining the Air Max 1 outsole. These also aren't too bad. And then the Comfort Max 12, same with the Air Max 97 technology and the Air Jordan 12 upper, and they did the same thing on the 13. These are all, to be honest, shit. Next up, the Air Jordan Legacy 312. This was a design from Don C, who you'll remember from his successful collaborations with Air Jordan before on the Air Jordan 2s, and also at one point Kanye's manager. Now the 312 is pretty cool because it brings together the Air Jordan 1, it brings together the Air Jordan 3, and the Nike Alpha Force Low, which are three sneakers that MJ wore obviously very early on in his career. And the 312 also refers to a Chicago area code, so this sneaker is packed with cool references. I actually think the midsole tooling from the 3 and the shape of the 1 upper and the strap actually come together to cohere quite nicely. This is in fact one of my favorite fusions. I also like the transition over to low. They kind of almost look like an air trainer or a cross trainer or a football shoe, and so I would put the 312 right up there next to the Zoom Vapors and the Spizikes as one of the best Fusion Jordans of all time. And so that is it. A special mention to the Fusions that we are looking forward to receiving next year in the form of the Air Jordan 2/3. I think these really work. I think these look really cool. I think with the right type of color blocking, these will definitely be popular, although I don't see them becoming hype or anything like that. And also to the Spizike lows, which I think also make a really nice transition from high to low and look pretty cool. Now, there's a lot of models that I haven't mentioned, including a lot of the team versions, a lot of the mellow versions. There are just about as many Air Jordan Fusion spin-offs these days as there are days in the year. And so if there were any notable omissions, feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks as always, guys, for taking the time to watch the video. Don't forget to hit the like button before you bounce, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care for now. Peace.